band practice. We got a couple announcements this morning, not 12 like last week, so hooray. First announcement on the screen. Children's Church, ages 3 to 2nd grade. Josiah, am I right that that's only second service? Or is that both? Second service for Children's Church. Next up, I believe along the lines, never mind, I thought I had these in the right order. Potluck, dinner, and movie. Okay, The Case for Christ. I'll give you my personal plug. My favorite Christian film I've ever watched. Super well done, incredible story, incredible acting. Be here because there's food and a great movie. It's also just a great way to get to know people. Case for Christ was probably the second book I read after I started really following Christ, and it's awesome. It's just so good. So the movie's just as good. 5 to 7:30 p.m. Volunteers needed. You can contact the lovely Carrie Steffen, please, if you can volunteer. Next up on our docket, nursery volunteers needed, okay? If you are now or have ever been a baby, we would like you to volunteer for the nursery, okay? So you can talk to Melissa Peter. Actually, if you are now a baby, wait a couple years. We'll get you volunteered later. Okay, so talk to Melissa Peterson. Is Melissa here already? Not yet? Okay, so if you need to know who Melissa is, say, hey, Josh, who's Melissa? And I'll point. Sometimes pointing is rude, sometimes it's helpful. This time it's helpful. So volunteers needed in the nursery. Next up on our announcements, men's and women's group. So we started a combined study this past Wednesday on worship. We talked about how in the throne room in Revelation 4 and 5, there were some amazing pictures, some amazing visuals, and yet no one was distracted by them because they were all focused on the throne of God. Okay, so that was our first week talking about worship. And I would challenge you this morning to do just that, to do your darndest to be focused on the Lord this morning, to eliminate distractions. If you would like to come to the series on worship, we'd love to have you. We have a few more weeks planned. This week, Paul will be talking about why do we sing? Sounds like a simple question, but we're going to dig into the scriptures as to why we do the things we do on Sunday mornings. It's Wednesday at 6:30 right here at Downtown Mission Church, and there is worship afterwards, so you get to worship twice a week. Do I need to give you more benefits of coming? No, that's enough. Cool. I think that's our last slide. No, one more. Foster care presentation and lunch. That is next Sunday after church from 12 to 2. The deal here is we want to inform our congregation about how we can support parents that have foster children. Now, you might have a heart where you would like to foster a child. Both are welcome, okay? So things like, we're talking babysitting, trying to relieve stress of people that are fostering children because it is a stressful endeavor. So we'd like as many people to come to that as possible. My phone number is up on the screen there. Please no prank calls, only texts if you would like to come. That way we can get an idea of if we need food, if we should reschedule. So phone number's up there, and yes, it is 615. That is a Tennessee area code, not 715 in Wisconsin. Thank you, darling. All right, that's all we got this morning. You're up, Paul.
Let us stand and greet each other this morning. I told her that too. She also looks beautiful.
Good morning.
Didn't come across as. Oh, I will not be saying that. Hey, there you go.
Equestrian boots again.
I look. You sound great. You look fine.
Good morning.
Fine as in like fine, not like, oh, dang, you fine. All right, Joe.
Jesus is coming Jesus is coming soon. Like a bride waiting for her groom, we'll be a church ready for you. Every heart longing for a king, we sing, even so come, Lord Jesus, come. Even so come, Lord Jesus, come. There will be justice, all will be new. Your name forever, faithful and true. Jesus is coming soon. Like a bride waiting for her groom, we'll be church ready for you. Every heart longing for our King, we sing, even so come, Lord Jesus, come. Even so come, Lord Jesus, come. So we wait for you. God, we wait, you're coming soon. So we wait for you. God, we wait, you're coming soon. Like a bride waiting for her groom, we'll be a church ready for you. Every heart longing for her King, we sing. Like a bride waiting for her groom, we'll be church ready for you. Every heart longing for our King, we sing. Even so come, Lord Jesus, come. Even so come, Lord Jesus, come. Even so come, Lord Jesus, come. All creatures of our God and King, lift up your voice and with us sing. Oh, praise Him, Alleluia. Thou burning sun with golden beam, thou silver moon with golden gleam. Oh, praise Him, oh, praise Him. Alleluia, alleluia,
Isn't he worthy of us shouting his name? I love that. I love that all that is within us shouts. There is nothing left within us that is not busy shouting about how glorious and how majestic is our Lord. Good morning and welcome to Downtown Mission Church as I try to sign into my tablet. My name is Josh Holland. I lead the men's ministry here. I am filling in for Charlie Salamone. He's currently teaching a series for some young adults at a camp in Amherst, Wisconsin. So he's kind of helping build up the new generation, and I get to help build us up today, and I'm excited about that. Any of you know what the 10th commandment is? We got a hand. She just went through all 10. I just wanted the 10th. Okay, well done, Tristan. Okay. That's a welcome surprise this morning. Thank you so much, honey. Yes, those are the 10. The 10th one we're talking specifically, you shall not covet. Okay? I want to begin this morning with a question. Why is not coveting, not wanting things, so important that it is listed alongside some what we would consider really grievous sins? Okay? It's listed alongside murder. It's listed alongside adultery. It's listed alongside making and worshiping idols that are not the Lord. And then we have this 10th one that seems, I think if we're honest, it seems kind of like not that bad. You shall not covet. So the question, why is this listed alongside the other 9 that seem more serious? Why is this commandment that important? So we're going to start by kind of recapping a series that we've been in, and then I hope to answer that question for you. We're currently in a series on financial giving. It's a fun topic to talk about in the church. Everyone loves for someone to stand up here and tell them how to do or what to do with their money, right? You guys love that. So we're in a series on financial giving, and we have been discussing as a church leadership this series for probably 3 months, since mid-October. And in fact, a couple of weeks ago, probably a month and a half ago, I sat down with Charlie Salamone to discuss the content for each week, what Chris Tillman would preach, what Pastor Charlie would preach, what I would preach. And it was funny because Charlie, who each week battles a sense of anxiety, trying to figure out, to discern what the Lord has in any given sermon for our church, he gave that patented Charlie sigh. He goes, oh, you know that one that he gives right before sermons. And he gave that sigh. And he said, it's kind of nice to know what we're going to be talking about in 2 months. There was a sense of relief as we discussed this. And it has been something that we have discussed for months and prayed about and thought, what are the passages, what are the messages that are best suited for our specific congregation? So we didn't just say, well, it's good to do giving in January and we'll do it. No, we said, what do our people need? And that's why Pastor Chris Tillman started off in week 1 talking about the heart of generosity and how it comes from the gospel. And he also gave an example of how the generosity of the people in our church has directly allowed the gospel to get to people like Zach and Grace O'Malley. If you were here a couple weeks ago, he put a picture of them and their baby girl and one on the way up there, and how neither of them knew the Lord, but because of Downtown Mission Church Wausau and Downtown Mission Church Stevens Point, and how it was funded by giving from the congregation, they were able to go out. And that's 2, hopefully 4 souls that are saved because of the generosity within the church. It's amazing. I mean, we should be celebrating the generosity that is already happening. So that was week 1. We didn't want to sit up here and beat you over the head saying you're not doing enough without saying you're doing a lot, okay? So that's amazing to start off with. Then in week 2, Pastor Charlie got up here and he discussed more specifically what a generous heart is. And he likened God drawing generosity out of a naturally selfish heart to Moses striking the rock and water pouring forth. And he did that because both God changing our hearts in a way that we become generous instead of becoming selfish, and water coming from a stone, both of those are purely and clearly acts of God. And both of those point back to the God who made us generous. He walked through 2 Corinthians and said that the Corinthians were supposed to continue their promise to give because the Macedonians had seen them giving and their faith was increased. And then he tells the story about the Macedonians to the Corinthians, and hopefully their faith is increased. And so it is ever-increasing cycle of trusting more and more in this Lord who changes our hearts to be more generous. And so our goal as we get to week 3 was never for you all to leave on a Sunday morning and think, well, I got to change my New Year's resolution because the pastors said that I got to give more. Or for you to leave and you to think, man, the Bible commands me and I really don't want to disobey that, so I'll do it out of duty or obedience. Our heart in this series was to try to show you what God has for you in financial giving, the supreme benefits for a Christian of giving, what you get from the Lord himself when you give, the benefits to others, like the O'Malleys that Chris talked about. Today we're talking about another spiritual benefit of giving. It's a little bit harder to talk about, though. This is going to be one that might ruffle some feathers. Know that I have prayed for weeks about doing this in the most loving way possible. But today we're talking about the chief issue he's so often in the psalm. Okay? So it's kind of like, I want to ask the question, is there a constant thought in your life that if you just had more money, your life would be better? Just be easier, be more comfortable. It's just this thing that would provide you security and comfort. So we have this passage that says, put to death. Do not treat coveting as some kind of third-tier sin that can be managed, and if it flares up every once in a while, it'll be okay. No, kill it. And we'll see why a little bit later on. But I want to do a little bit of just some rapid-fire scriptures to continue to build the reason why the scriptures say this thing, this greed, this coveting money is so dangerous. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, or do you not know that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of God? Do not be deceived. Neither the sexually immoral, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor men who practice homosexuality, nor thieves, nor the greedy, nor drunkards will inherit the kingdom of God. Ephesians 5, for you may be sure of this, that everyone who is sexually immoral or impure or who is covetous, that is, an idolater, has no inheritance in the kingdom of Christ in God. Jesus said, for out of the heart come evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, coveting, wickedness, deceit. All these evil things defile a person. 1 Timothy, the Apostle Paul writes, but those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, into a snare, into many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. It is through this craving that some people, eager for it, have wandered away from the faith. That's not even half of the scriptures that I found about greed and coveting. Search the word, search greed Bible. I mean, there's so many texts about the dangers of setting your sights on money as something that will fulfill you. Let's listen to Jesus once again. No one can serve two masters. For either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. So if you've got money and God, you're going to love one and hate the other. You're not going to love them equally. You can't choose both. You'll love one, you'll hate the other. And I think that's a better way for me to process my view of money, is not do I serve money, it's do I love it? I mean, do I love it? So that's our question. Do you love money? Do you seek after it? It's a better question than me saying, are you greedy? Because when I say greed, I bet you think about people with a lot more money than you. Okay, so we think about greed and we think about millionaires. And they are the people that have like the gold coin rooms that they take baths in, and they just have cash on their bed. And we think about, there's just like these weird perverted views of what greed is. I think the Bible's clear that it doesn't matter how much money you have, you could be poor and be greedy. because it's not about the possession of money or even the ability to get the money. It's about your view of it. It's about your desire to have it. And so the Bible does not say you cannot have money. It says you cannot love it. The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. So do you love money? Do you look for security in money? Do you seek after it? Do you think that it will satisfy the longings of your heart? Do you think that more money will finally put you at ease? If so, these are signs that you're coveting money. Here's the problem with coveting anything other than Christ is it'll never satisfy you. Ecclesiastes is clear that the person who loves money will never be satisfied, nor the person who loves his income with his wealth. You'll never get a big enough check. You won't. And that's why the scriptures are warning against coveting. This is why in Exodus, the Lord put it in the top 10 list of dangerous sins. This is why the Apostle Paul says, if you do these things, you won't inherit the kingdom of God, is because you have a choice to set your mind on one of two things. And if you set your mind on money, you cannot set your heart on Christ, because you will seek in the money the things that Jesus has already promised you. Jesus has promised you security in a heavenly inheritance. Jesus has promised rest for your souls because he died on a cross so that you don't have to work for salvation anymore. Jesus has promised you the most comfort that you could ever imagine because when you die, you will be with him. But when we love money, we seek those three things, security, comfort, and rest, in something that is not Christ. That is idolatry. And that's why it's so serious, guys. Fix your eyes on Jesus, the author and the perfecter of your faith, and love and serve him, not money. There's an example of Christ encountering someone who loved money. He does this actually a lot. He encounters a lot of people who love cash, and he challenges them. Here's just one example, and we started off with it earlier today, but here's the context of what happened. Right before this passage, Jesus had just got done telling the crowds that if they acknowledge him as the Son of Man, as the Son of God, that he will acknowledge them before the angels of God. He had just got done promising these people that if they understand who he is and profess him to be Lord, that he will acknowledge them before the angels of God. What a promise. What a promise to be known and acknowledged by Jesus. And the very next question that some man says is, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Like, how short-sighted. He just got done promising you a heavenly inheritance if you know who he is and you're worried about the earthly inheritance. Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. But Jesus said to him, "Man, who made me a judge or arbitrator over you?" And he said to them, "Take care." So notice he said to them, so he kind of is talking to the guy and then he turns to the crowds. He says to them, "Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions." So this guy says, "Jesus, tell my brother to divide the inheritance." Backstory here, in this time period, inheritance is basically all you had. So if you had two brothers, the older brother gets 2/3, the younger brother gets 1/3. Okay? So it's not exactly dividing it down the middle. That's just how the lineage worked. Who knows, this might be the younger brother who's saying, "Give me my 1/3. That's fair, right? Like, that's the rules. The older brother is supposed to give the younger brother 1/3. And I think that if many of us were Israelites in that day, we would have been like, "Jesus, do it. Give him what he deserves. Give him the money." But Jesus sees through this man's heart, and he kind of dodges the question and says, "I'm not here to make that decision." But what he does see is a problem with this man, that this man did not come to him because he was concerned with justice. He didn't come to him because he really wanted the laws of the day followed. He came to him because he wanted money. And he was disregarding the fact that Jesus had just said, "I am the Son of Man," because he was more concerned with getting his inheritance. That's why Jesus says, "Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, because your life does not consist in these things." Then Jesus routinely stood before people and said, "I am life." So this man missed the fact that life itself was standing in front of him because he wanted his 1/3. And Jesus follows this by talking about this parable of a rich fool. And this rich fool had land that produced abundantly. He had more crops than he could do with, and he said to himself, "Self, what shall I do?" And he said, "I know what I'll do. I'll build bigger barns." Okay? So I'll build bigger barns. It'll give me more room to store all this wealth that I have just accrued. And so in this parable, the man builds bigger barns. And he sits back, and I imagine him kicking his feet up, and he says, "I will say to my soul, soul, relax, because you have ample goods stored up for the future." The end of the parable that Jesus tells is the Lord requiring this man's soul that night. So the man dies. And all of a sudden, all of this wealth that he had stored up in these bigger barns that he had built, all of a sudden there's no security in them. All of a sudden there's no relaxation in them. This thing that allowed the man to put his feet up and feel comfortable was worthless when he died. There's a lot to be said about the worth of money when we die, but we're really talking about the heart attitude of the man, because he says he gets all this stuff, more than he knows what to do with, and he says, "What shall I do?" There's a pretty good answer to that question, right? Give some of it away. You've got, take what you need and maybe even a little bit more. Yes, we could agree with that. Take 120% of what you need and then give some away. Don't build bigger barns. You can do both. You can have some security and you can be generous. But he says, "What shall I do?" And his heart says, keep it. Hold on to it. Place security in it. And he builds bigger barns. Take care and be on guard. So if we have this idea that the accrual of wealth will give us the opportunity to kick our feet up and relax, of course we're not going to give it away. Because in being generous, we're giving away our chance to rest. This is once again why it's idolatry, because we're not resting in Christ. We're resting in our ability to make and keep money. So I'm kind of in an interesting position professionally right now. So I work a number of days at a certain rate, a certain hourly rate. And once I reach a threshold of 20 days, there's that hourly rate increases. And then later on, I get kind of the makeup pay for the first 20 days that I hadn't been paid for. So if that doesn't make sense, basically, I get less up front and more on the back end. And so I started this job in October, and from mid-October, ironically, around the time that we started talking about this greed series, or this giving series, from mid-October until mid-December, I kept thinking, I can't wait for that makeup check. Oh, that's going to be great. I can't wait. And I kind of had an idea of how much it would be, and I was excited. I thought, okay, we're going to save this much. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. And I mean, there wasn't a day that went by that I wasn't at work thinking, this is one more day. Check off one more day. I'm at 17. I need to get to 20. And then in mid-December, I'll get this check. I thought about it all the time. And so this day comes, payday comes, and I get this check, and it's the biggest check I've ever received from a job. And so I'm like, it's here. This is the thing that I wanted. And I felt so great for 45 minutes. And I put some money in savings, and I texted Morgan. I said, look what we did. This is great. And then I started thinking, I need to get another one. I need to find another one of these jobs, because they're not guaranteed. I need to send out emails. I need to network. I need to find another one of these jobs because, I want another one. I had enjoyed somewhat. A thing that I had been thinking about for 3 months gave me about 45 minutes of satisfaction before I thought, I got to get more. I got to keep more. That sounds kind of small if we're honest. But in that moment, I'd spent a good amount of time hoping for that money and not hoping in Christ. So don't trick yourself into thinking that greed is a small sin. Because any little thing that takes you even for a moment, takes your focus even for a moment off of Jesus, is a big thing. So how do we fight greed? How do we fight it? Give your money away. Just give it away. No one left yet, so I think we're on a good start. Okay, this is the Apostle Paul again So if you're mad about this sermon, really be mad at the Apostle Paul because most of these passages are from him. This is 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 17 through 19. In my outline, I have this titled, How Giving Puts Greed to Death. Remember, the Apostle Paul said, put it to death. And this is how giving does that. Paul writes, as for the rich in this present age, charge them not to be haughty, that's kind of arrogant. Charge them not to be arrogant, nor to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. They are to do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share, thus storing up treasure for themselves as a good foundation for the future, so that they may take hold of what is truly life. As for the rich in this present age, we're talking about the 1%, right? Just those guys and gals. I'm pretty sure if Paul was writing to the church at Downtown Mission, he would consider most of us rich. Because about 10 verses earlier, Paul says, we should be content with food and clothing. Believe most of us in this room have much more than food and clothing. We have much more food than we actually need. We have much more clothing than we actually need. We have more money than we actually need. We have bigger houses than we actually need. I believe that if Paul was writing to the church at Downtown Mission, he would consider most of us the rich of the present age. He says, as for those people, charge them not to be arrogant, okay? Don't be arrogant. Don't set your hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly provides us with everything. It's a curious phrase, on God who richly provides us with everything. Okay, so the good Christian answer is God gives everything, right? God gave life, God created the world, everything is God's. But do you actually view your paycheck like that? I mean, you get paid on a Friday, it goes into your bank account because of the work that you put in. Do you think to your soul and say, soul, this is the Lord's money? I don't. I say, I worked for this. And yet the Bible continually says this is a gift from the God who gives everything. And I know that some of us are thinking, I work really darn hard for my money. And I know you do. But even the intellect that you use at your job, the work ethic that maybe your parents taught you, the health that keeps your body in a position where you can show up to work, these are gifts. And unless we view the money that comes in as a gift from God, we sure will not give it away. So yeah, work hard for your money. Read the Proverbs. It talks all the time about working hard and being diligent. And it also talks about money as a gift from God. Yes, and. Both of those are true. Now, giving sees money as a tool rather than something to hoard. So we go to our next verse. The rich are to do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share. So Paul says, if you get money, you should have a posture of readiness because there's going to be opportunities for you to share. So don't do the opposite and get a bunch of money and say, that's over here not to be touched. I heard a story about a pastor one time. I loved this, and I haven't done it yet, so I should. But him and his wife made more money than they needed, and what he would do is him and his wife would each carry around like $5 $100 bills, and they would pray for the Lord to give them needs. That might have been at their church, that might have been at their workplace. They would say, God, this morning we have this money that we don't need, but we know that there are people in need. Would you show them to us? And so they would take this, whatever $1,000 they had from their monthly checks, and they would just give it because they were ready to share, right? They hadn't put it in their savings account and said, never to be touched. They had said, it's in my pocket, it's ready to be given. It's on deck if you're a baseball fan. It's ready to get out there. That's what the Apostle Paul says for the people that are rich in this present age, be generous and ready to share. Thus storing up treasure for themselves as a good foundation for the future. Charlie talked about this a little bit about this last week, how when you give, the Lord enriches you in every way. That's in 2 Corinthians chapter 9. And one of the things he mentioned is that as you give of yourself, as you give of your time, and as you give particularly of your money, the Lord enriches you. Now, he might enrich you financially to keep giving, but he also enriches you with himself, because as you sacrifice something, you become more like the Jesus who sacrificed his comfort in heaven to be brutalized on a cross so that you could have eternal comfort. And so when you're asking yourself, should I give my money away because I'll have to take it from this thing that I want, the question should be, did Jesus keep the thing that was perfect, or did he humble himself to the point of death on a cross so that you and I could have eternal life? What if we viewed our money like that? And I'll be honest, guys, in 2 Corinthians chapter 8, when Paul says the example of giving is Christ who gave everything, 10% sounds like an easy one in comparison to Jesus giving up his life. Like that sounds like I can do that. And so my question for myself, and know that as we stand up here preaching, we are preaching to ourselves too. You know, as Chris dug into texts, as Charlie dug into texts, we learn this for weeks before we ever say it to you. It's something that we have dissected in our own hearts too. My question is, can I give more? Can we give more? And I so value a lesson that my wife taught me during our engagement. And it was, she said that whenever she went to give to the church, and she felt her grip tightening just a little bit, that she would give more than she thought she was supposed to. So maybe it was $20 more, maybe it was $15 more. The amount doesn't matter. The response was, if I'm supposed to give this much and I really don't want to, I'm going to give a little bit more. And it was so valuable for us, and it happened in the past couple months because we just started budgeting, and we were in a bit of a financial hole because we've been a little bit foolish with our credit card over the summer. And my first reaction the first couple months was, woof, we should just not give to the church. We'll take that money, we'll pay off the credit card, we'll get that done faster. And I recognized because of that lesson that Morgan taught me, no. So we gave a little bit more. And it did take longer to get out of that hole. But I wasn't gripped by this desire to keep everything I had. And that's what's so freeing about giving your money, is if you think of greed as a tight grasp and giving as an open hand. Giving opens that tight grasp, and it makes the thing that you want so badly, the money, it makes it less important. Because if you're giving something away, it can't be your God. It just can't be. As you're giving it away, you're saying, Lord, I trust you. I trust that you are what I need. I trust that you will provide. I trust that you will do good things with this money. I trust that your gospel is worth this money, that this money will produce faith in people who see me being generous. I mean, you can think a million things as you give. But the reality is, in that giving, it is freeing for you, because you are taking it off of the pedestal of the thing that provides you security and comfort and rest in your life, and you're putting Jesus back on that pedestal. And it's amazing. I was so thankful for that lesson. So this is the heart of the commandments of the Bible, guys, is there is not a single commandment that is intended to burden you. Every time the Lord tells us to do something, it is intended to bring us into what's called conformity with him. It's to bring us to be more like him, and therefore to be more free, because that's what we were made to be. So when God calls us to give, he's calling us to be like him, because he gave everything. He gave his only son. Jesus gave up his heavenly home. So that's the heart of these commandments. Our last passage this morning is in Deuteronomy chapter 30. Deuteronomy, the book, is kind of the second law. Deuteronomos means second law. And so in chapter 5, Moses restated the commandments. And I just valued so much digging into chapter 4 and 5 and seeing the heart of the Lord in these commandments. And then ending near the end of Deuteronomy with this passage. I call heaven and earth to witness against you today, this is Moses speaking, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and curse. Therefore choose life, that you and your offspring may live, loving the Lord your God, obeying his voice, holding fast to him, for he is your life and length of days. At the end of 2 Timothy, that's what Paul said. He said, give of your money, be ready to share, be generous, because then you can take hold of what is truly life. And then Moses in Deuteronomy says, I've got these two options for you, life and death. Life is obeying the command of the Lord. Life is knowing him and following the things that he says are good for you. And death is doing what you want instead. Death is holding your grip on something that is not the Lord. Life and death. And he pleads, and I hear the voice of Moses saying, choose life. Please choose life. And that's where we find ourselves, guys, with things like greed. We have the ability to choose life and to choose death. To see that this command to not covet is good for us. And in doing so, to release our grip on our money. Give it away. Be ready to share. Let's choose life. Let's choose to love Jesus. Let's choose to love him instead of money. Let's choose to love him with all of our heart and all of our mind and all of our strength as the only thing that we will ever covet. Let's pray. Lord Jesus, you are so worthy of our attention and our affection. You became poor for our sake so that we who were poor could become rich. How much more so should we who are rich give of ourselves so that others who are needy can have? Father, there is no amount of wise words that I could say to free any of our hearts from greed. That is something that you have to do. God, I ask that you will do that by using the scriptures that we have looked at this morning. You said that as the rain and the snow falls from heaven and does not return there, but waters the earth, so too will your word do, that it will not return to you empty, that it will make our heart spring forth and sprout, that it will accomplish that which you purpose. And I trust, Lord, that you purposed something for us this morning, and I ask and know that you will accomplish that. God, thank you for allowing us to praise you and to be free because you have provided us with security and rest. Amen.
At this time, the baskets come around. Let's stand. For my hope is from Him, from God alone. For God alone, my soul wait in silence. For my hope is from Him, from God alone.
if the past few weeks have sparked something in you and you think, man, I want to be generous, or I see the need for giving, but I have no clue how or when or where it goes or any of these questions, what I'd like you to do over the next few weeks is pray and ask the Lord, what do you have for me to give? And how can I give? And then in February, Wes and Carrie Steffen are going to lead like a brief financial seminar that talks a little bit about budgeting, a little bit about figuring out how your money is used so that we can better use our money, and then we'll be better able to give, okay? So if that's something that scares you, budgeting scares you, come talk to one of us in person, and we'll try to lighten some of that load. I asked them to leave this verse up on the screen. My soul will rest in your embrace, Jesus. That's the heart of giving, guys, is that as you loosen your grip on money, you allow yourself to rest in the embrace of the one who died for you. Go in peace.